Hi, I'm Dr. Nicole Lipkin, and this is the Hey Kiddo podcast where we talk about all things parenting. Today, we are talking about how to teach social emotional learning through children's literature. My guests are Dave Mossman and Brian Nolet, two individuals driven by a shared vision to make a positive impact on children's lives, and the founders of Buddyz. Welcome to the show, Dave and Brian. I'm really excited to have you on and to chat about this.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your book and the inspiration behind it?
Sure. Yeah. So our book is called Jungle Buddyz, A Race to Remember. And really it came about as, I wanted to write a book for a long time. I have two boys myself. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old son. So I would read them, stories every night. And they were stories, they were great, but there weren't a lot of learning aspects to them. So I thought, hey, why not me? I can draw, I can create something like this. But I wanted it to have some kind of an impact on the readers. I didn't want it to be just another story. So I approached Dave and we started talking, and he had kind of similar thoughts where he wanted to write a book as well. And so we came together and, that's how the Buddyz formed. And so going back and forth, we came up with a list of characters. We actually sent out surveys to roughly 200 people who helped us choose what animals to put into our book. So it was great to have the community involved in that. And from there, we assigned them traits and came up with a story. And then we got an illustrator. Awesome. But we really wanted to incorporate social emotional learning into our stories, to help provide kind of a foundation for children today to hopefully help improve them in the future. So that's one of the things, one of the main reasons I myself wanted to create this book. So maybe Dave can talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and my experience, I'm a teacher on a First Nations isolated reservation up here in Canada. We have a small community, about 300 people, and we're on an island. We got to fly in to get here. And
wow.
I know, just seeing over the years, especially since the pandemic, the struggles that a lot of kids have had in my class and the younger grades in terms of socializing with each other and cooperating and having those social skills. And I've always wanted to write a kids book. So Brian and I have known each other for about 3 years. And then we came together, formed the Buddyz, and like Brian mentioned, developed Jungle Buddyz, our very first book series.
So cool. Well, one of my questions I was going to ask is, where does the a boat come from? And you answered it. You're both
there
from
you
Canada.
go, Canada. Yep,
yep, a boat. So, Dave, tell me. So, your experience as an educator. So, I'd like to know what have been some of the changes you have seen in students pre and post COVID.
Yeah, well, during the time of the pandemic, a lot of kids were staying at home. They weren't socializing with other kids. So we have found that when the kids are coming to school and come to class, especially the ones, in kindergarten through grade 5, 6, we have seen a change in students from pre-COVID in terms of, they're much quieter. They're used to being on their devices. They're not used to when they're in a scenario where they have to share, where conflict arises, or they don't know how to handle their emotions or handle how to act. So that's why we really wanted to develop a book series that kind of teaches those coping mechanisms and skills through engaging stories and storytelling to kind of teach kids about social emotional learning. I mean, they don't know the term social emotional learning, but we do, and we kind of want to teach those traits to the kids.
Sure. Did you see any changes? And Brian, as a dad, I want to ask a similar question, but Dave, before I move on, have you seen any positive things come from COVID in the development of children as an educator?
As an educator, it's hard because in our community it's very small. It's actually been a kind of a negative impact. We haven't seen any positive, very positive skills come from the kids. A lot of them know how to use technology a lot more, at a
Yeah.
young age, because they were using a lot of technology at home. A lot were doing online learning, so they had to learn how to use
Hmm.
computer and devices. But in terms of social interaction, we've seen a decline in, how they cope and how they act around others and act around other
Got
kids
you.
and with
Got you.
adults.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the time, before they were around teachers a lot and educational assistants and out in the community at the store and meeting different adults, meeting different kids. And for a couple years there, they, especially at a very young age, a lot of them, when they're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, they're stuck at home, and not having that much interaction. So we
So it's been
slowly,
a negative.
yeah, and year after year, we're seeing an improvement in the kids, obviously, because they're coming to school and they're interacting with others. But
Sure.
we're hoping that it gets better in the years to come.
Yeah. Brian, what about you just being a dad of a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old? What have you noticed pre and post?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed a lot of similar things that Dave has talked about. When COVID happened, my oldest was just in kindergarten, and so he came home and basically did the online learning for 2 straight years,
Hmm.
and it really came to be that that was all he knew. And it's bad to say, but
Mm.
it's almost at a point now where he wants to be inside more than outside playing with kids.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to encourage him to get out. We register him in sports, and
Hmm.
the youngest is only 3 years old right now, so he was only born in COVID. And again, this is
Yep.
all he knows, so it's hard to say. I would think it definitely has had more of a negative impact than a positive impact on the way children behave.
Hmm.
That's for sure, because they did miss out on a couple key years of really their growing and hanging out with kids. And even when my oldest James was growing up, we originally had him in a home daycare with very few kids, and then we moved him to a daycare center where there were more kids, more teachers, and we found that just being around more kids, he talked more, he acted differently, he was more outgoing. And then COVID happened, and it kind of put a halt to all that, and it was
Yeah.
almost like starting all over again. So
Yep.
it really
It's
was too bad.
tough.
It was
It's
very
tough.
tough.
It's
It was very
really
tough.
tough. It's really tough. The good news is kids are really resilient.
Yes, which is
And adults are resilient. Like we can be, like, 'cause it's really hard to see your kids go through this. It's really hard to see as an educator, as a parent, to see, as a psychologist, to see kids struggle like this. But we can also be resilient. We can also model that this is something we can all get through, which is
Exactly.
a sign of hope.
Yep. Exactly.
yeah. And I think
So, yeah.
like you said, kids are resilient, and by intentionally integrating social emotional learning into our books, the hope is that kids will see that the characters are resilient as well and be able to relate to those
Yep.
characters and bring that into their real world issues should something come
Yep.
up. So that was one of the big bonuses for us. We wanted to have a fun story,
Hmm.
but we wanted to integrate those social emotional lessons almost subliminally. They're there, but it's not like you're coming right out and telling you this is what you need to do, this is how you have to act, because then the story's not fun either. So
Right.
you get to be kind of a combination of everything is what we found. So through our
So
research.
why books? Why books? Like, what's your philosophy behind using books as a form of developing social emotional skills versus something else?
Well, especially, for us, it was, Brian and I thought of the book idea mainly because we've always had this individual dream of writing a book. So, other
Hmm.
ideas didn't pop in our heads. Books was the first thing that did. And I knew that in where I live, not a lot of the parents read to their kids at home. And I knew that, developing a book and focusing a lot on reading and storytelling post COVID and then coming back to school would be very, very important for kids to develop, their reading skills, their listening and comprehension skills. So,
Hmm.
that's why we chose books. That was our main idea. Right away, we wanted to write a book. We actually came up with the idea of books before social emotional learning. I know Brian and I were thinking, we want to make a difference. We want to make an impact through storytelling. And I know through my work as an educator, attending a lot of conferences, and throughout the past I'd say 5 years or so, I've attended a lot of conferences where the main focus was social emotional learning and how we
Yeah.
integrate it into the curriculum up here in our schools. So that's
Hmm.
where we decided, okay, let's use social emotional learning in our books.
Got you. Okay. So do you have suggestions for caregivers as they're engaging with their kiddos around the stories you wrote or the story you wrote or just social emotional stories in general? Because there's a lot of books out there that have social emotional concepts. This is just so important to build. So what are your suggestions for caregivers?
A big part what we do in our class and with the kids at our school is a lot of role playing. In
Hmm.
terms of, we read the book, we read the story, and when through telling the storytelling, using different voices and showing that emotion when you are telling the story and not just reading it.
Mm.
When a
Hmm.
character's sad or when they're angry, like when you're reading to your kids to really show those emotions so the kid can kind of
Yeah.
see that emotion through the storytelling. I know that when after I read a book to kids, sometimes we do some role playing and I give them certain scenarios of what to act out so they get that experience of, if someone didn't share with me or someone took my toy or I didn't get what I want, how to go about acting appropriately or in a way that, is fair to everybody.
Okay. So what are
I think,
the,
sorry,
sorry, go ahead,
so
Brian.
just to
Mhm.
add on that, I was just going to say that, you know, apart from caregivers, it's important for everybody to practice social emotional learning. So, if a child is at school for 8 hours a day and then they go home and their home life
Mhm.
is completely different, they're going to
Yep.
act more so, the way their parents are teaching them and stuff like that. So it's on the parents as well to be able to integrate these social emotional lessons into everyday life for the kids. So, a child that comes from a nurturing home is more likely to be self-confident and more resilient down the road. Whereas, if a child comes from neglect or self-abuse, they might be shy, or they might be afraid to try certain things. They're less confident. It really does shape your child's personality, the way you act at home. So, like we know, they're sponges. They see the way you act in certain situations. If you're angry and you show it, they're going to act the same way. So, with our books, again, we're trying to show kids how to monitor their self-awareness, and which in turn, leads to self-control. So if they realize why certain issues are happening, then they have better control. With emotional awareness comes emotional control. But again, all that to say that it really is important to have these social emotional lessons all the time, not just through caregivers, not just through school. Parents are a
Right.
major part in this, I think. So
They are. And the psychologist in me is having to add a caveat. Self-awareness does not necessarily lead to self emotional regulation, but it's
Right.
definitely along the road. There's techniques also to be integrated with when it comes to emotional regulation. I just want to add that caveat. So with your books, what social emotional topics and issues are you addressing, and what do you think is really important for children to learn?
Yeah, well, in our first book, we deal with Scooter the sloth, who, in the sloths are known to be very slow, and there's a big race happening in the jungle. So we knew that we wanted to make Scooter the main character of our first book. It was
Yeah.
also the character that was selected by when we put out that survey. It was the most popular character. Not many people see a book with sloths, so
Yeah.
we wanted to him have that self doubt because kids deal with especially since the pandemic when they're I found that when we have been teaching gym or physical education, the kids are nervous to participate in certain activities because they're not used to playing with other kids, they're not used to showing their skills or embarrassing themselves, and they get all these nerves. So we really wanted with the first book to concentrate on anxiousness or kids feeling nervous and having that self-doubt and how to get through that, and kind of emphasize that self-belief and believing in yourself. And we know there's a lot of books out there that kind of hone in on that topic,
Yeah.
but with the first book we wanted that to be the self-awareness and his friends, the Jungle Buddies, coming to
Yeah.
support him and encourage him throughout the story. So even throughout the book, there's one part where Milo the monkey before the race kind of teaches breathing techniques to
Hmm.
Scooter, holding in your breath and breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, and have a sense of calmness before the big race, and doing the best you can, and kind of teaching that lesson through that. And we are developing other books in the Jungle Buddies series that will focus on each character of the buddies. There's 5 of them,
Yeah.
and dealing with a different emotion and how the Jungle Buddies kind of rally around them to help them throughout that situation.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's actually smart that you started with that kind of nervousness, all of that, because
Yeah,
that's been one of the biggest things that kiddos are struggling with, that
for sure.
anxiousness.
And
Yeah.
even I have a real struggle with kids, answering questions in class and putting up their hands and having that self-confidence. So we really wanted to develop that skill first, or have that in our first book.
So, that's interesting when, kids, you're noticing that kids are really struggling with self-confidence and participating in the classroom. How do you encourage it as a teacher?
Well, I kind of, like I said, we like through storytelling, through practicing role play, different activities, and encouraging them. A big part is really honing in on those skills at the beginning of September, and that's what we do. We've had staff meetings
Hmm.
where we kind of discuss this, and kind of across our school system do the same thing with all the teachers and all the kids, so that the kids feel like it's normal to put up your hand, answer a question. If you're wrong, that's okay. Teaching kids that it's okay if you get the wrong answer. It's okay if you try a sport and you're not good at it, and that we're here to support them. We know as adults that even if a kid isn't doing well, just to be there for supporting and encouragement. And it's great to see. I know that even after reading our story to, say, my class, I find that at my school, a lot of the kids are at a lower level because they have done the online learning or missed a lot,
Yeah.
being so
Yeah.
isolated. And we're isolated up here in northern community, and not everybody was doing the at-home learning. So through reading the story and doing the role playing, and just encouraging kids to do their best they can, and that no answer is wrong. I mean, there's wrong answers, but that it's great to give ideas and participate. So, and I've
Right.
seen a big difference over the past 2 years of teaching up here, in terms of just the kids coming to school every day and developing those skills.
Right. Right. Brian, have you noticed anything on your side with your own kids with this? How do they respond when you're reading the book to them, and how are they
Right.
engaging?
Right. So, I mean, I read the book more often to my youngest than my oldest now. When we get to the part about the breathing techniques, he won't let me go any farther unless we practice it ourselves. So,
It's great.
take deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and he does it every night. He won't let me go past it
Hmm.
until we get to that.
Hmm.
So, obviously, this is something that he has in his mind. So, hopefully, he'll practice that, at daycare or at school. So,
Yep.
it
Yep.
really
I
is.
love
It
it.
really is nice to see something that Dave and I put together, that it really is affecting them. So, and and
Absolutely.
and to be fair, it's not just my kids that are seeing this. We've had stories from parents where you know Dave had a story about a child who, I believe, he had autism,
Autism, yeah.
and they would go on a trip, and he would bring several books to read on this trip. But their most recent trip, he only wanted to bring his Jungle Buddies book to read. That
That's
was the
great.
only one. So I mean, for us, it was really special to see that it's affecting other kids in a positive way. So
Hmm. So moving away from the actual book and talking more about kind of just social, as an educator, as a parent, I'd like to understand how you, as a family, how you as an educator, how you kind of encourage families to interact, and what your thought process is on engaging around social emotional issues. And we were talking before that parenting is key, obviously with this, and as a founder of Hey Kiddo, which is focused on parenting adults, yes, 100%. But what are the kind of things that you kind of think about when you're thinking about how families can engage?
Well, I think a big part is, when kids come home from school, is interacting with your kids and finding out how their day went, and finding out, what happened. Because I know that a lot of kids where I am from, their parents don't really, I mean, there's a lot of parents that don't do that. And a lot of parents nowadays strictly give their kid the iPad, give their kid the computer, TV. And it's really important to engage with your kid and find out how their day went, what they did, and really how they're feeling that day. And I know Brian and I developed a journal, a daily emotions journal for kids. Brian and I developed for younger kids that they can draw about their day, can work with their parents within a workbook and describe, 3 kind things they did that day, draw their day, how they feel. They can circle if they're happy, sad, mad, anxious. There's different prompts in our journal. So it's really getting involved in your kid's life to show the child that you care, that you're invested in them and their feelings and how their day went, and talking freely about those emotions. Because a lot of times kids might come home and be all angry, but the parent isn't sitting down, asking those questions like, what happened today and why do you feel this way, and letting them know that it's okay to have those feelings. Sometimes when a parent and sometimes even teachers see a kid angry or upset or acting out, the parent gets frustrated or the teacher gets frustrated and sends them to the office or sends them to their room. And really, I feel like my perspective on it is that you really need to sit down and ask those questions and find out why the child is going through these emotions and these feelings, and work through those feelings and emotions with them. And as adults, we all deal with these kind of feelings as well, and we're all learning how to manage our own behaviors and emotions.
Yeah. I
really
actually think one of the best ways is, as a parent, as an adult, as an educator, to be more expressive with our own emotions.
Yes.
And help children understand through that lens, and admitting when we're wrong and all of that stuff, and talking
Yes.
about, yes, I feel angry, and here's some strategies that I'm using to help
Exactly.
calm myself. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brian, any thoughts on that? About kind of
Yeah,
how
I
you
think
kind of encourage families?
sure. I think kind of similar to what Dave said, that the thought prompting questions are extremely important. And before bed, I'll talk to my boys, and I'll ask them
Mhm.
stuff that we asked them in the journal. What were the 3 best things about your day and why? And then they'll tell me about their day, and they're able to reflect on the good and the bad of that day. So
Mhm.
not only does that help me understand what's going on in their life, but I feel like it creates a stronger bond between parent and child as well. So
Sure.
always having kind of a positive environment for them to be around, I think. So parents don't always understand what kids are going through, and kids don't necessarily know how to express themselves always. So for me personally, it's important to keep in mind that I should have almost an empathetic response to something they do, rather than a punitive response right away. So
Mhm.
I'll sit them down and find out, why do you think it's okay to do this? Why did you throw your water bottle? Why did you do this? And because that just may be the only way my son knows how to express himself. He doesn't know how to tell me what's going on, what's wrong, right off the top of his head. So once you calm him down and you have that discussion, I find
Mhm.
it opens up more of a way for me to understand what's going on, and then maybe it helps him reflect a bit as well. Oh, maybe I don't need to do this. Maybe something else,
Mhm.
I could do something else. So as a parent, I just open discussion, I think, is very important, and always
Right.
having a positive environment, I think.
Right. And maybe framing questions more like, if the kid's throwing the water bottle, it might be less about like the why, but more also about like, hey, how were you feeling when you threw that water
Yes.
bottle? Like
Exactly.
getting to the emotion, because a lot of times we know that kids with the why questions like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How are you
that's
feeling?
true.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, so yes, absolutely creating a supportive, empathetic, open, communicative family environment. So, any last words, like how, just when you think about your books and literature, using books as a tool for developing social emotional skills, how can parents and educators best utilize your books and other books, and journals and writing, all of that, to support children's emotional development? Like, what are the key takeaways here?
Wow. I mean, like that's such a
The
big,
loaded
broad
one.
question. There's so many things they can do, right?
Yeah.
With I find literature is very important in kind of shaping children. Literature
Mm-hmm.
acts as a safe space where kids can almost immerse themselves in the story, and attach themselves to a character. And if they see this character showing empathy and showing resilience, they can reflect on that and almost act that way in their real world issues. As for, teachers, caregivers, for our book specifically, we've created, lesson plans that coincide
Hmm.
with the book. So, teachers can use these in their classrooms. They're free to use. So I think we have a few dozen. There's dozens of lesson plans, ranging from different topics. So, that's definitely something that we hope will positively impact children. So
And I think too that, we do have our book, we have a journal, there's a lot of resources out there in the world nowadays, but it is really important for parents out there when they, say if they have our book or have our journal or have any other kind of book that deals with these kind of topics, is, I think you mentioned this before, is really just talking about those emotions. Like, sure, you can read the book, but having those discussions with your child after you read the book, and diving into, why do you think Scooter felt that way? Because,
Hmm.
we have the story, but really talking about, is there anything else, maybe his jungle buddies could have helped him with, or, kind of thinking about other questions to ask your children while reading the book, or if they're journaling, and really building that relationship with your child, so that they
That's
feel
great.
they
Hmm.
feel comfortable that whatever they're dealing with in life. I know that some kids out there that I have, taught have a difficult time speaking with their parents because their parents aren't showing those emotions. They aren't asking
Hmm.
them questions. So it's really important for parents out there to not only read these books that are out there about social emotional learning, or our book, or use our journal or any other journal, but really, ask those kind of questions and really try to understand your child and their feelings, and showing those emotions, like you said, Nicole, so that they realize that it's okay to express yourself and
Right.
okay to have these feelings. And just, we're just trying to be, to develop some resources out there that can help kids, help parents, help educators. But really, it's, the parents out there that really need to utilize those resources and really understand their child, and connect with them in that way, so that they do feel
Absolutely.
comfortable, expressing themselves to their parents, so that you can help them out through different situations, or they can help themselves, and learn those strategies and coping mechanisms.
I think one more thing that's kind of unique is that,
Hmm.
Dave and I are two grown men talking about emotions, and that's,
Hmm.
it's pointed out a few times to us that that's not normally how things are. So
Hmm.
it's especially important for us to show, especially young boys, that it is okay to show emotion and stuff like that. It's
Hmm.
A lot of things have changed over the years, and when I was growing up, it was you have to be tough, you have to be strong, and it's okay to show emotion. So we want kids to be able to see that, and even parents themselves, you know, just because you're teaching the kids this, I myself can still learn social emotional learning. Different parents can still learn different social emotional learning techniques. So I think it's important for everyone, not just kids, to kind of
Absolutely.
reflect on everything that's happening in their lives, and what they can do. So
Absolutely. We're evolving till the day we die. Of course, we can keep learning it. So let's do the top five takeaways. What do you want parents listening to take away?
Well, like I said, one of the top ones is just paying attention to your child, and what
Hmm.
they're going through, and asking those questions, right? And see and understanding, what's happening on a day-to-day basis with your child.
Hmm.
I know, Brian, you're about to speak.
oh, I was going to say that, you know literature is definitely an important tool to help
Yep.
teach your kids social emotional learning. So whether it's reading to them or having them read on their own, it's definitely a very useful and powerful tool that kids can learn social emotional learning through. So literature for sure.
I think a big thing too is having your kid have that social interaction with others. I know that
Hmm.
not related to the book, but that's what's happening in our book, and that's why we developed a book with multiple characters that are kind of going. Each one is going through a different emotion, and each one has different character traits because we're all different out there. So
Absolutely.
we want kids to get that out of our storytelling as well, that because they might relate to a certain character and learn from what that character is going through.
I think another takeaway would probably be that, you know, having discussions with your kids, as you said, you know, being open is extremely important. Having those thought prompting questions to encourage discussion with your kids is definitely super important in their everyday life, to just not even well, I guess more so to find out about their day, but more than that, to kind of create that bond with your child. So I think thought prompting questions and the positive home environment is definitely extremely important. So
Well, I really appreciate you both coming on. I'm excited to read Jungle Buddyz to Charlie, to my son. It sounds like he's the perfect age for it. So I really thank you so much for doing this work and for writing something and putting it out there and helping being role models to build these really strong, important foundational skills. Thank you both so much for joining us today and joining me today and speaking about
Oh, thank you so
buddies.
much. And like anybody out there that wants to check out the book, they can, look up Jungle Buddyz, Buddyz, on Amazon, on Google, and we'll pop up.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Oh,
Well,
thank
thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Hey Kiddo. If you like what you hear, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about Hey Kiddo at our website, hey-kiddo.com. Have a question for our experts? Email us at hello@hey-kiddo.com.